Hi there. Glad you're back again. Um, just to consider very shortly and quickly the question, why is it called Koine Greek? Why do we call the Greek of the New Testament Koine Greek? Koine meaning common, from the Greek word koinos for common. Um, Sometimes it's referred to as classical Greek, but that's a misnomer, really. Classical Greek would be the period prior to the first century before Christ and the second century after Christ, which were the main was the main time period for our language, Koine Greek. Classical Greek would, of course, include the philosophers like Aristotle and Socrates that are common. If we don't know what they taught, at least we know the names. Um, but um, Actually, these would normally be divided into various historical periods. If we go much back behind 1000 BC, we really don't know hardly anything about the Greek language except what we can guess. But the period before the New Testament period, the Koine period, should be referred to as Classical Greek. And then the period we are studying is Common Greek or Koine Greek. And the question arises, if I can just share um, my slides with you, the question arises again, why do we call it Koine Greek? Why is the New Testament in a common language? And short answer to this question is that the conquest of Alexander the Great, whose name will be well known to the South Asian students who are listening, watching this video, uh, um, went almost to the border of India where he was when he died. And for a period of time after 300 BC, Greek began to change from the classical language that it had been to a melting pot language that we know as Common Greek, Koine Greek, again, which flourished particularly in the period of the New Testament, just before and during and just afterwards. And then Latin becomes common in the West, and um, Greek remained so for some centuries in the East. Um, the conquest of Alexander, of course, brought in connection many languages and people groups who had not known each other before, but they were forced to learn the language of the um, conquerors, the invaders, and they brought their own language and also changes into the Greek languages as they came in. The Greek language began, you'll be glad to know, somewhat more simplified. It may not seem like it's simplified when we study it, but it certainly was from the classical. And by the time of the first century AD, it became, in the providence of God, a unique period in the history of the world. Greek language was like English today. Um, the lingua franca, the common tongue, the language of commerce, certainly, and of other religious field, field and many other aspects of culture. Uh, in, as I mentioned, the second and the century before Christ and then the century after his birth. It was the language of the Roman Empire until, as I mentioned, in the second and third centuries after the birth of Christ. And during the time of the church fathers, the Latin became predominant in the West, and that is why many of our church fathers wrote in Latin instead of in Greek. In the East, they maintained Greek. In the West, they didn't. So that's just a little background um, about our language. Sorry, coming back about this language and why we refer to it as Koine Greek, Common Greek. The period that comes after Koine Greek is referred to as Byzantine Greek, in which Istanbul, or Constantinople as it was known then, was the center of the eastern center of the empire. Then comes medieval Greek, and then we move into the more modern period, and I think there is an even another term for even recent developments in the Greek language, sorry. In modern Greek, many of the diacritical marks, accents, breathing marks, and so on that we will get to know disappear and are just simply taken out. I would mention that only because there is a new tendency to learn Greek with modern pronunciation. And you will find video segments on this course, for example, by Constantine Campbell, one of the leading New Testament scholars of our day. And he will give the pronunciation of Greek words in both the traditional and in modern Greek. Because many people, since Greek is a spoken language today, and I understand that Grecians, people whose mother tongue is Greek, can read to a certain extent the language of the New Testament. It's more alike modern Greek than, say, Old English is to modern English. Chaucer or Beowulf would be to our literature today. So they can read it to some extent. We are not going to learn it, however, learn the pronunciation in the modern style. For one thing, I'm not familiar with the modern style, and I would have to, as they say, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. It would take a lot of time and effort for me, constant thinking, wait a minute, how is that pronounced in modern language? And so I'm going to use the traditional pronunciation. You'll find in your textbook, in the back of the book, an explanation of if you want to change to modern pronunciation of how you can do that. But for right now, that's just a short explanation of the Greek language that we are learning and how it developed. And I certainly think it was in the providence of God that he brought it into being. I think we cannot say that it is more expressive or a better theological language. I'm not sure that that's true than other languages, than even Old Testament Hebrew. Scholars would certainly debate that point. But what we can say is that God led for there to be a common language within the empire as the first apostles went out. And the first churches were established and Christianity spread very quickly, even though they didn't have the lines of communication that we have today. So thank you for listening, and I hope this is profitable. In the future, I will try to give more resources in case you're interested in questions like these. But I think if you look this up on, well, this one even up on that not so reputable source, Wikipedia, online, that you can get some useful information there. There are some subjects that Wikipedia is good for, And most of the time I won't recommend it, but for this I will. And other history resources that you can evaluate for yourself. So look online, and I hope again, I hope that this course is a great lesson to you.